Hey guys, it's Jason Snavely, certified wildlife biologist and founder and president of Drop-Tine Wildlife Consulting, the Drop-Tine Seed Company, and of course, Drop-Tine Podcast. Guys, I've 17 years private wildlife consultant, graduated from Mississippi State University, and one of the things I really enjoy doing is traveling the country and watching clients realize their dreams of taking a small piece of property and turning it into something really, really special.
Welcome back, listeners. I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am to announce the new listener-supported, ad-free, premium content podcast platform. I'm fully committed to this platform, and I'd like to take a minute to thank each and every one of you for listening and giving me feedback via email, text, phone call, and in person. I really appreciate it, and to be honest, your feedback has served as the number one motivating factor in my decision to scale the work I do for the podcast. Starting in September of 2023, I'll be adding the Drop-Tine Innovators podcast, a subscriber-only, member-supported, premium content podcast. I hope you'll join along and become a Drop-Tine Innovator. In fact, I've already included bonus content for members that you can listen to right now. The bonus episode addresses preliminary observations from the Mississippi State University regenerative food plotting research that includes seed blends from the Drop-Tine Seed Company. After 60 episodes of the Drop-Tine podcast, I had to make a decision. As you know, I not only enjoy podcasting with some of the most influential and innovative professionals in the wildlife, hunting, soil science, plant pathology, forest management, ecology, regenerative agriculture, and associated professions, I also thoroughly enjoy taking you into what I do as a consultant. Deep dives into topics that affect us as wildlife managers, hunters, and recreational property owners. In order to invest the time the podcast deserves, I had to monetize the show, with incredibly popular episodes racking up impressive, unique download statistics. I knew I had to continue delivering the same great content, but give you more of it more consistently and push the boundaries even more. That's exactly what the Drop-Tine Innovators podcast will deliver on. I've entertained the advertiser model, and to be honest, while talking this over with many great business owners, some of who are listening to this episode, it just never felt right. If I accept money from a company that offers a product or a service, I would be handcuffed to only promote that company, and rightfully so. Even worse, I'd have to tiptoe or mindfully avoid mentioning other great products that compete with my paying advertisers. You see this with other popular web shows where content is created merely to push a narrative that benefits the companies who pay the bills. My consulting and my show have always been about presenting and discussing independent information while seeking only the best in products and services. To me, the formula to the best podcast is combining the best guests with the best products that actually perform and the best management practices for your specific context. All of these ingredients simply result in the best content. While I would benefit from upfront advertiser or sponsor dollars, and the companies themselves would certainly benefit from the exposure gained from the podcast, you, the listener, would lose because I would become beholden to just those who fund the show. But if the listeners fund the show through a small monthly or annual subscription, My sole job is delivering 100% unbiased information to my listeners. Content geared toward benefiting only you, my listeners. Information created from feedback from you has created this platform, and I appreciate that. Honestly, when I think about information created by you, the listener, I like the sound of that. While this approach will most definitely take longer to build out, there's no doubt in my mind that this model most benefits you, the listener. After heavily considering multiple models for the podcast moving forward, I decided that the best way to offer high-quality premium content was to establish the Drop-Tine Innovators podcast, a premium, ad-free, and uncensored and unfiltered member-only podcast that's very similar to the original Drop-Tine podcast, except I'm guaranteeing more episodes consistently each month. To start, I'm offering a minimum of 2 podcasts each month. The more you demand through memberships, the more I'll deliver. I'll provide member innovators with an email address that goes directly to me so we can communicate and help steer the direction of the podcast with input on what you want more of. The more you refer to subscribing members, the more time I can devote to building out bonus content and focus on unbiased deer and wildlife journalism, void of any advertiser-driven sales and marketing content. I consider the new Drop-Tine Innovators podcast to be a form of my consulting, coming directly at you with a no-holds-barred approach to delivering premium, ad-free monthly content. In typical Drop-Tine fashion, the deep dives are with innovators who are at the top of their game, many experts who have been shielded, to be quite honest with you, from the public because their knowledge doesn't financially benefit the funders of some research, and some possess knowledge that would actually discredit the experts or mainstream talking points. I find the experts who thoroughly cover key topics that will be packaged up in exclusive member-only content on the podcast app of your choice. The greatest part is nothing changes on your end, just more mind-blowing content. To give you a sneak peek, I'm going to go ahead and include some of my playbook here, and I'm going to look forward to over-delivering on the most cutting-edge deep dive discussions on some of the following topics. The first one I'd like to talk about is the update on the Mississippi State University regenerative food plotting research that I'm involved with, including how I developed the blends for the MSU study, observation updates from the field, new soil testing that grades and verifies the regenerative management and soil building food plot practices applied, and details how far we've actually come since baseline. We'll have in-depth discussions with experts like Dr. Rick Haney that other platforms simply do not have access to. Here's a clip from the bonus content episode that's already posted on the Drop-Tine Innovators podcast with Dr. Bronson Strickland and Luke Resop. I love that, Luke. Good note. I'm glad you stole my thunder, but yeah, observation is the first step.
And one more little, not to get down a philosophy of science road too far here, people will go to sleep, but coupling of those two also protects you. And so, Jason, I know you consult, triple digits, maybe in the thousands of times you've heard this from a client or potential client. Such and such, this happened, I know it, I saw it. But you, with your training, your background, your experience, I agree and I believe you that you think you saw something going on. But in reality, this is the underlying phenomenon that explains, what you think you saw. In deer management, we deal with it all the time with people that have been part of a property or a hunting club or something. I can tell you, as part of the DMAP program in Mississippi, you'll get some people, well, back in such and such, name the era. Back in the 80s, this happened. Back in the 90s, and the deer were fill in the blank. The deer were all big. They were all 150s, blah, 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 blah. You go back and look at the data, and you're like, that can't be true. But see, that's what's so critical about this project is the coupling of what we are seeing, the immediate real-time feedback, but then also having that measurement, having those anchor points, having that baseline from where we're starting and then where we're going to end 4 years from now. So again, just to reiterate, both of these are very important.
No, I like it. So Luke, this is a brief question that I'm going to ask. I don't know about you all, but I could listen to and talk to Bronson Strickland about deer all day long. And I'll just throw out one more clip, if I can find it here, from that same episode that, again, is already on the Innovators podcast. Okay, well, you took some soil samples for me.
Oh, yeah.
You were there, I think you were there taking your own, and I said, this is on me. Just take me, to take samples of year 1 versus year 3 and send them into the lab. And you did that. And I got those soils, and I wanted to do what Rick Haney calls a treatment analysis. And this is ultimately why I decided to be willing to talk about this and support this, as opposed to say, this is crazy, this isn't how nature works. No, you can't prove anything. So I looked at the 1 year, Bronson, you'll love this. We looked at that 1 year regen versus 3 year regen from a biological standpoint, right? Because that's really what we're doing when we get into regenerative and soil health systems approaches. It's all about the biology. No longer just looking at the man-made chemistry and the physical sand, silt, clay, et cetera. And basically, Rick ran a bunch of numbers, and we said, okay, if the treatment is worse, in other words, if the 3 year is worse than the 1 year, now I'm talking from worse from a biological standpoint, Haney test, strictly Haney test, the resulting number will be negative. If the treatment is better, obviously it's going to be positive. So, we're not looking at the difference in a football game. We're more so looking at the difference to scale in a golf match, right? If you win, and you're 2 under, I'm not a golfer anymore, but you're 2 under, that's a pretty big win in pro golf or whatever. So a 0 essentially means, these things are identical. There's no difference at all. And this is going to be, I think, in my opinion, a test of the future. It's all developed by Rick Haney. And our conversation of, Rick, how can I make sure we fare, not that I'm rooting for one over the other, because the end of this research or the outcome is not going to change how I operate and manage, but how can we make sure we're doing this assessment fairly? And we started talking about this, and we said, well, if you're on a diet and you're trending, or you want to lift or whatever, and you're trending in a good direction, that's good. Whether it's good enough or not is up to you, right? But to be constantly trending in the positive direction, your number, because of your observation and us running these numbers, we're looking at a plethora of parameters, soil health parameters. And I think you just took a composite soil sample, 0 to 6 inches of both those sites, was a 6. Rick said, I love this. I'm going to start running this on some of the largest, most productive and successful regenerative agriculture guys out there. And I don't know if I should say this or not, but it was common to see a 1, a 3, a 4. There were some, 5s and 6s, and he's got hundreds of thousands of data to go over. And again, I think you'll be hearing more about this in the future, but a 6. And yes, I had worked with that client, visited that client, and kind of I still help and guide him on how to regeneratively restore ecosystems. And he's a very patient, and he's a damn good manager. So there you go. That was just some very good conversation with Luke Resop and Dr. Bronson Strickland. And I know without a doubt you're going to hear more about these types of creative, innovative techniques to study soil health And the treatment analysis is mind-blowing. I kind of dropped it on Bronson and Luke in that podcast. Really hadn't planned on it, to be honest with you. But very, very good data to have. And that's an incredible podcast. And that's why I wanted to throw it up as sort of premium bonus content to get this going. Now, the next thing I want to talk about a lot more is chronic wasting disease. So I know, we talked with a couple of guests on the free public podcast, and many of you called, emailed, and texted and said, hey, when are you going to do more on this deep dive that you talk about on CWD? Well, I didn't stop. I've been doing it. It's mind-blowing what all is involved in this topic. When you're studying the popular literature, like the magazines on the newsstand and your state agency's websites and maybe publications from the state agency, newspapers, newsletters, that doesn't even consider or scratch the surface of what's going on with chronic wasting disease. And to be honest with you, we have more answers than they want to know, more answers than they want to admit to. So we go much deeper on the chronic wasting disease topic, discussing origin stories behind CWD, cover the facts from the latest peer-reviewed research, some of which is kind of hidden or not really promoted too much by state agencies and nonprofits. Talk with experts in all niches of CWD, whether we agree with them or disagree. It doesn't really matter. But more specifically, would like to dig more on the whitetail journalism behind what information is being hidden and why are we ignoring so much information that we have on CWD. And then I already have a series of recorded in-depth discussions on roller crimping prepared. I've mentioned this in the past. I went at length, took a deep dive and speak at length with many of the pioneers of roller crimping. Among other things, we discussed different contexts that wildlife food plotters fall under, as opposed to the production agriculture model and how farmers use the roller crimper. And here, I'll go ahead and play a couple of clips that I have. The first one was with, again, these are going to be posted on the Innovators Only podcast here in the very near future. Shows are ready, up, and scheduled. This one was with Jeff Moyer from the Rodale Institute. And I think John Brubaker is where, this is where he comes in, if I'm not mistaken, on the history. I'm a history buff, and some people are probably saying, this isn't going to help me decide when I should crimp my cereal rye, but I just think it's not out there enough, so I'm just curious.
Well, yeah, I do remember exactly what happened. It was back in about 1994, 95. We had a research scientist here that was doing some cover crop work with tillage, and we have I don't know if you know much about research plots and fields, but they're replicated and randomized. And so we had a 3-acre field that we had these plots in. I think there was like 130 or 140 separate plots within that 3-acre field. And when we planted the cover crops, what happened was, you lay out the research plots in a perfect rectangle. Mm-hmm. And then there was odd shapes and edges of the field that we just planted the cover crop into because it was just easier. You had to turn around anyway, so you just run the grain drill in there, plant the cover crops, and then we carved the research plots out of this field, leaving these edges and borders. And when we went in there to plant corn into the whole field was going to get planted to corn once we managed each of these little plots individually. We went in and planted corn, and again, it's just easier to plant corn right to the edge of the field, and so we planted right out of the research plots into the edge of the field and turned around and went back in and planted a field. No big deal. Most of the cover crop that we used on the edges and borders of the field turned out to be a cover crop called hairy vetch. Hairy vetch is a winter annual. You typically plant it in the fall. It germinates late in fall. doesn't really grow too much, stays under the snow in the winter. When everything warms up in spring, it grows like gangbusters, and it'll produce tons and tons of nitrogen. And, up to, well, we've had as high as 300 pounds, but we tell people 150 pounds of nitrogen you can produce easily with a crop of hairy vetch. 200, 250 is not uncommon at all. So you can grow a lot of nitrogen, fix that in the soil for a subsequent crop. And so this hairy vetch was growing there, and when we planted the corn, we didn't have a roller crimper then. We didn't really have that in mind. We simply drove all over the edges of the field because that's what researchers do. They just drive on it. So, in effect, we smashed it down against the ground. And a few weeks later, maybe 10 days later, 2 weeks later, a neighbor stopped in to visit with me. I was the farm manager at the time. And he said, "Hey, I thought you guys were organic." I said, "We are." He says, "Hey, well, somebody sprayed herbicide up on that 3-acre field of yours up there." He said, because he said it's everything's burned off and there's corn growing up through it. I hadn't been up to the field.
That podcast with Jeff Moyer is absolutely incredible. I enjoyed recording that. And again, that one is on the Innovators podcast, premium content. One of the main reasons that I ended up recording a deep dive on roller crimping and roller crimpers is because I had watched a 10-minute web show that was shared with me by a client from Missouri who had watched this web show, a popular web show, advertiser, again, sponsors, advertisers. And after 10 minutes, my client said, "I hear a lot of conflicting information with what we talk about and what we see in the field." So I watched it. I don't generally watch this particular show, but I watched it at 10 minutes and 40 seconds or whatever it was. And I sat back in my office chair and I thought, wow, if I didn't know much about that particular content, roller crimping, I would probably be A, very confused, and B, I would be armed with very little tangible knowledge to get out there and use that tool in the most effective manner. I decided instantly that I would do more of a deep dive discussion. I felt like that particular gentleman had maybe regurgitated, recycled some material from the production ag model, and quite frankly, the wildlife context of employing a roller crimper tool is not the same as the context of a production ag, let's say a organic or regenerative soybean farmer or corn or whatever they're growing. So again, that deep dive was a blast. And of course, you can't go back on origin stories on roller crimpers without including Steve Groff from Pennsylvania. Here's a clip from Steve.
I think most of us around here like to hunt some deer. It's just that sometimes when there's 12 of them out in your pumpkin field, that's a little too many.
So, yeah. Okay, well, good. I appreciate that input. So I guess you agree with me then that in a certain context, having a little bit of hairy vetch, crimson clover, cereal rye, or whatever species it may be, mature, go to viable seed and re-sprout is not the end of the world. And it's not the reason to go to the barn and pull out the glyphosate.
Well, it might hurt your seed sales a little, Jason, but you can at least make it a marketing tool that if a little hairy vetch grows and that's entirely possible, crimson clover in the fall, that's good for the buyer because it's like free seed.
From late May through June, I bet daily I have that conversation with clients where I say to them that they're scared to death about having it, reach that mature stage. And I say, so let me get this straight. You bought one seed from me, right? Yeah. That you put in the ground and turned into what? A bushel or, hundreds or thousands of seeds. And you're upset about this. That almost sounds like, investing in a mutual fund and being angry that you actually, saw
made money.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they say, oh, okay, well, this is kind of dumb coming from you because you sell seed. And I tell people all the time, I didn't sell seed or get into seed sales to put my kids through college. I got into it because I was disappointed in what the market was producing and I just wasn't happy with it. So, yeah. Super cool episode there with Steve. And again, that one is scheduled to upload on the Innovators podcast here shortly. I also have a mind-blowing thriller of an episode recorded with one of the expert witnesses in the Monsanto trials that resulted in 3 huge losses for Monsanto Bayer. If you use Roundup or eat food produced by modern chemical agriculture, this one podcast is worth more than the annual membership alone. This particular expert physician takes us into the courtroom and details the Monsanto playbook. We further discuss the connection between glyphosate and a special form of cancer, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. If you liked the Dr. Don Huber podcast on glyphosate, I guarantee you're going to enjoy this particular episode. Now, after that Dr. Don Huber episode, so many of you had so many questions. That one's been posted for quite a while, and just yesterday, I received an email from a gentleman who said, I listened to it, mind-blowing. I still have so many questions, and it scares the hell out of me. So I've gone down that rabbit hole with more in the works right now on glyphosate and, quite frankly, other herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, the sides, if you will. So here's a clip from that particular episode that I think is going to air much sooner than the rest of them, probably right around the 6th or 7th of September.
You know, being a lymphoma specialist and being an oncologist, I was taught that there is a link between pesticides in general and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, that pesticides increase the risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Farmers happen to have higher risk of developing non-Hodgkin lymphoma from an occupational standpoint. But I was not really familiar with the nitty-gritty details of the herbicide Roundup and its association. I just was aware of the category in general as pesticides. So, of course, if they were talking to me, I'm on the computer Googling. You know, that's what we do, obviously. I'm like, let me just see what's going on there. And you see all kind of stuff. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I mean, there's so many things happening there. But, you know, folks saying it's the safest thing in the world, others saying it's the worst thing in the world. And there was a lot of things. And I said, well, you know, I'm not going to say no. I'd like some time just to research this. I'd like just to better understand what's going on there. And so give me a few weeks and I'll get back to you. And they said, well, let us send you additional documents that you may use in your search as well, whether it is papers or things that were captured through the discovery process with Monsanto, because they were representing some patients that were suing Monsanto because they alleged that the lymphoma they developed was because of their heavy use of Roundup. So I signed some confidential documents, and they sent me that USB drive that you're referring to, which has a lot of material, and I was doing my own research. And a few weeks in, you know, I was pretty convinced that there is a link there, that the link does exist, and we'll talk about that. And I said, you know, I'm willing to help you to the extent possible. What I did not know is how big this was going to get.
If you want to get inside the courtroom on one of the largest court cases on a product, that episode will blow your mind. I really enjoyed talking to that individual, and I think you'll enjoy hearing that. So as I typed up some of my bullet points here that I wanted to cover in this particular podcast, I realize now that I've got so many. I don't know that you want to hear all these, but this was my playbook. I firmly believe in under-promising and over-delivering on content and, quite frankly, anything else. But I'll continue to read a couple of these. Of course, we'll continue to lead the conversation around regenerative food plotting and soil health building practices with more conversations on soil testing, regenerative verification programs, customizing seed blends for the phase of regen that you're in, and honestly, how to ensure that your plants continue to fix dirt. I'm going to introduce you to and update you on the glyphosate in the soil research that I've been doing with one of my clients in Wisconsin. I'll discuss how to test your soils for glyphosate, why it's important, and let you in on one of the products that we're using to naturally degrade the disruptive mineral chelating glyphosate in our soils. I'm going to tackle some hot button topics in each state and address region-specific content surrounding transition from conventional chemical farming to regenerative food plotting. As a consultant, I've been fortunate in the last 21 years to work with clients from every state where whitetails can legally be hunted. I'll make sure we cover your specific region, and I'll provide an email address for innovators so that you can request other specific content or even region-specific content. We will get better together as an innovator community. I'm going to talk about the declines in the wild turkey populations, and I'll introduce some of what I believe to be one of the maybe main factors in the decline in wild turkey numbers and share some citizen science that I've done in this space. I want to talk to more product pioneers who are producing the highest quality products related to hunting, agriculture, food plotting, soil health, and property management. Moving forward, I'd like to plan bonus episodes, interactive and video content, and AMAs or Ask Me Anythings with me and special guests discussing all aspects of wildlife management, hunting, recreational properties, and really any topic even remotely related. I personally guarantee that although we will remain completely professional, I'll never avoid politically inflamed conversations as they relate to hunting, deer, wildlife management, agriculture, and related topics. Listener members will be the first to hear about new products and events from leading companies, including Drop-Tine. I'm going to cover native habitat management, prescribed fire, mature buck hunting strategies, predator ecology, the ever-popular field reports from properties and food plot managers around the country. The show will deliver uncensored discussions with thought leaders and innovators with a twist of edutainment, the finely crafted blend of education and entertainment that has made the free public version of the Drop-Tine podcast wildly popular among its loyal listenership. Finally, I'm sure you might be wondering, will the free version of the Drop-Tine podcast continue? Yes, absolutely, it will. However, while I'll include free content from time to time, it will mostly be used to provide insight through shortened audio clips and discussions like I've given you here today, and to give you an idea of what you can expect from the Innovators podcast. We all have plenty of buying decisions to make in our lives, and I know it can sometimes be difficult. I'll try to make it easy for you to decide if the premium content of the Innovators podcast is something that makes sense for you. I've spent a few months developing this platform, and the Innovators podcast platform is, in my mind, the best answer for everyone involved. I can't be more excited. To become a member, here we go. Just simply go to glow.fm/Drop-Tine. That's glow, glow.fm/Drop-Tine. Now, Drop-Tine has a hyphen. So glow.fm/drop-tine, and decide whether you want to pay the monthly fee or simply invest for the full year with, of course, a savings in doing so. You can also find this link to subscribe in the show notes of this podcast. Again, it's glow.fm/Drop-Tine, and there is a hyphen between the P and the T. glow.fm/Drop-Tine. In less than 30 seconds, you can be an Innovator member. Just click the link in the show notes, enter your credit card, Apple Pay, Google Pay, however you pay, and it's going to ask you to click the podcast player that you want to use. It can be the same location you currently listen to all of your podcasts on, and that's probably what I would do. You don't have to create any new logins or passwords or any of that stuff. Just open your web browser. If you want another avenue, go to the very top where you enter the URL address for a website and type glow.fm/drop-tine. It's going to take you directly to the subscription page, and I think you'll figure out the rest from there. Here in another month or so, you can also visit the newly updated Drop-Tine Wildlife Consulting website, which I expect in about October of 2023 at droptinewildlife.com. And you can click on the podcast tab, then click Drop-Tine Innovators podcast, and it's going to make it simple for you to link and sign up right there. That particular website for the consulting, by the way, it's going to have blog articles and, of course, about info, and I'm pretty excited about that as well. I'm going to wrap this up and just say this. The raw and timely content discussed in the Innovators podcast is a product of simply asking better questions about popular wildlife, hunting, and land management issues. A subscription model ensures that content is driven and supported by you, the listener, not advertisers and their persuasive dollars. When you consume free content, the fact is you become the product as they sell you to spend your hard-earned money on their advertisers. As a consultant, I see this all the time. A client makes a bad buying decision because a biologist on a web show insisted that a specific no-till drill is the cat's meow or seed blend or whatever. Maybe it's a drill, actually it's most of the time, it's a drill that you don't even see farmers using across the grain belt, but you quickly, unknowingly become brainwashed to believe it. A model that benefits the bill payers of his or her show. Again, that works for him, not you. By investing in transparent content with your fellow innovators, people just like you, you hurdle the learning curve much, much faster while avoiding costly mistakes along the way. We relentlessly address the complicated topics that interest you the most. So sit back, relax, as we craft deep dive discussions on all things deer and wildlife. Thank you for listening, and now it's time to innovate.